So the question I'm trying to ask is to securitize or not to securitize, to be or not to be. That's the question we are answering, trying to answer. But what is this word securitization and what is desecuritization? These are the new fancy or relatively new fancy expressions we use in international relations, in foreign policy analysis. Well, securitization is everything is securitized. Foreign policy, you cannot think of foreign policy without securitizing it. It's part of security issues. And the relations of a country with another relation, with the relation of another country is always related to security. But sometimes, if possible, you can desecuritize some of the security issues. How do you do that? Well, what you do is like, for example, you have a neighbor and you always have this territorial conflict problem. So you try to resolve this territorial conflict problem through an economic way, through a liberal way, through an interdependence in economy. So the security problem gets lost, you somehow get rid of it, and you make it desecuritized. And there was a time when we had relations with KRG, Kurdish Regional Government. When it was established, we thought, oh my God, what are we going to do? That's a disaster for us. The Kurds of Turkey would like to do the same thing, but eventually, during that period, foreign minister of the period, Davutoğlu, took tons of businessmen and they went to this newly established KRG, Kurdish Regional Government in Iraq, and they had all these economic relations, and everything seemed to be too good to be true. Anyway, so that's what desecuritization means. An issue, security is taken and somehow resolved. Rather than making it a security issue, you turn it into a peaceful issue or an economic issue, kind of. So I just wanted to define what I was planning to talk about. All right, so now the question and what I am trying to answer, or what I'm trying to analyze in this lecture, is securitization of Turkish Middle Eastern relations. Recently, they got more and more securitized than ever. So why did that happen? But was there any period when those relations were desecuritized? Yes, there was a period. It was a very short period. And as I told you, it was too good to be true. And it sounded like a melody to our ears, but there was a short period. How did that happen? How can't we go back to those good old days? But it's not possible. So that's my subject. So what I will be talking about is, I will look at Turkish Middle Eastern relations. I will give you a brief background. Then I will mention 1990s, when everything was related to security. Then I'm going to look at 2000s, when things were more in a peaceful and liberal mode. Then 2010s, back to security. So that's what I'm looking. But I cannot look at every single relation of Turkey with every single Middle Eastern country. My concentration is mainly the countries that are surrounding Turkey, the neighboring countries, Iraq, Iran, Syria. And of course, recently there's more dense relations with Gulf states. So there's going to be a little bit of Gulf states, but I won't have the chance to get into too much details of Turkish-Egyptian, Turkish-Libyan relations, but I can mention them briefly. So here is the question. Is Turkey a Middle Eastern country? Well, we Turks love to say that, oh, Turkey is a European country. Yes, it is a European country. It has the historical background of Europe from the Ottoman Empire period. When I think of my grandparents coming from Macedonia, yes, it is European, actually, but it's an Asian country too, because we Turks came all the way from Mongolia to Anatolia in the 11th century. But it's also a Middle Eastern country. It is located in the Middle East, and we have the same history, Ottoman history. Ottoman Empire included many Middle Eastern countries inside. And we do share the same religion. That is very important. There are different sects of the religion, Sunnis and Shiites. Majority of the Turks are Sunni, but we do share the same religion. We belong to different ethnic groups. We are Turks, Iranians are Persian, and the rest of the Middle East is mostly Arabs. And we don't share the same ethnic group. We have different languages. We speak Turkish, they speak Arabic, Iranians speak Persian, Israelis speak Hebrew. But we do have some traditions in in our lifestyle, similarities, of course, culture-wise, not 100% the same, but we have similarities. But we do have a lot of similarities with our Greek friends too, Greek neighbors too. So Turkey is a country in the middle of all these cultures, but it is for sure a Middle Eastern country. All right. Okay, I have to figure this out. Here we go. So why is Middle East important for Turkey? Well, of course, energy, like everyone else, Middle East is very important. But 50+% of our natural gas comes from another country, as you already know, from Russia. But we do get plenty of oil from Middle Eastern countries. Of course, we should get it from Middle Eastern countries rather than Venezuela, because that's what you do. You get your gas or your natural resources or your oil mainly from the countries that are close to your borders. That makes sense because that's the easiest, that's the fastest. And economic significance, yes, there are trading partners. We do a lot of trade with them. And again, you do the trade with your neighboring countries. That's easier, that's faster, and that's quicker. That's important. So foreign direct investment in Turkey by Middle Eastern investors is high, especially by the oil exporting countries of the Gulf. So that is important, that it became more and more important during Justice and Development Party period. So there are trading partners, economically very significant. Security dimensions, yes, that's very important because we share borders like 600, is it 611, 900? I'm trying to remember the number of kilometers we are sharing with Syria. It's a long, long border. It's a shorter border with Iraq. It's a shorter border with Iran. But these are the three countries we share most of our borders. So security dimension is very important. If your neighboring country with a long border you share, if that neighboring country is going through a 10-year civil war, do not expect that you will have a peaceful life sharing those borders with your neighboring country. And on top of it, if there's a group like Kurdish Workers' Party, PKK, trying to take advantage of this situation, then it makes life even more complicated. Historical, cultural ties with the region, yes. A lot of those countries, and some of them are newly established at the end of the Second World War, after the divide and rule policies of British and French, and a lot of them lived under Ottoman rule. So we do have a lot of historical and cultural ties. If you visit those countries, you will find mosques that were built under the rule of Ottoman Empire, and it's also critical for Turkey's relations with the West. Yes, that's also very critical too. The Turkey seems to be a bridge between West and the East. So I just wanted to show you a map of Ottoman Empire, trying to show you that it was such a big empire that lasted for 600 years, and quite a number of countries that are independent today. Some parts of those countries, or a little part of those countries, were under the Ottoman rule. Syria, Iraq, which were actually established, and Lebanon and Jordan, they were also established, and Palestine and Israel, they were also established after the Second World War. Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, they have a different history. Saudi Arabia was also established after that period. So these are countries that are established at the end of the Second World War, a lot of them, and they were all under Ottoman rule. So Turkish Middle Eastern relations, it goes all the way back. Does it matter? It does matter. It does matter because there is this path dependency in comparative politics, or there is this cultural, sociological issues, sociological institutionalism or historical institutionalism, all comparative politics subjects. Yes, that means your past matters. It shapes your future. It has an impact on your future. Like we have always this feeling of, oh, those were the days, First World War, and the Arabs wanted to have independence, but Ottoman Empire was collapsing and did not want to give them independence, and they allied with the British. And we use this expression, they stepped us at the back. So that's a syndrome, like we have this from the past. We and Arabs, we can never be wonderful friends because of the past. They did not trust us. We did not trust them, kind of. So what you have experienced in the past, somehow it's a baggage on you. It comes with you. So that's something you should keep in mind. Okay, so when I studied Turkish Middle Eastern relations, that's a subject for my Turkish students, a very easy subject to understand since they are studying Turkish foreign policy until the 1990s and post-Cold Turkish foreign policy with Professor İrem Aşkar Karakıran. That's what they do, and they are quite familiar. For our Italian and for our Russian students, it can be a more complicated issue. But very briefly, I'll look at the early years of the Republic of Turkey and during the Cold War period. But my main concentration is securitization in 1990s, desecuritization in 2000s, back to securitization in 2010s. That's what I'm going to examine in this presentation. And I'm watching the time at the same time. Yes, okay. So, when we look at the early periods when Turkish Republic was established, Middle Eastern countries were under British and French mandates between the two world wars. That was after the collapse of Ottoman Empire, and that's the period when the young Republic of Turkey was established. So Syria and Lebanon was under French mandate, Iraq and Jordan were under British mandate, and Turkey was in the process of establishing its republic. It was trying to put its own house together, Atatürk's reforms, Atatürk's principles. So there was this reluctance of Turkey to get involved in the affairs of the region, and Turkey kept distance during that period because of the past. Like, we had enough of this trouble, and we tried to protect our Arab friends, and they stepped us from our back. They allied with the British. Look what the British has done. This is Turkish point of view. From Arab point of view, well, we wanted to have an independent Arabic kingdom, and Ottoman Empire did not let us do so. So both sides had their own baggages, and everyone was busy. Well, in the aftermath of World War II, Middle East countries were in the process of establishing their independent republics, like Syria was trying to establish. It had its own war of some kind of struggle of independence. Iraq was trying to establish its own country, but somehow Turkey was not supportive of these independence movements. Why? I mean, you would expect Turkey to support them with their independence movements, since Turkey has experienced the same. Well, Turkey was scared that if those countries will become independent, they will become in those days during the Cold War, they will become Russians' allies, USSR's allies, and they will all become a member of the communist camp. And that's what Turkey was scared, which wasn't the case, although they did not become a member of the communist camp. But what they did was, yes, they all allied with Soviet Union. They all allied, and they even had some socialist political parties called Baath parties. So they did. It was true. And Turkey had this scare of USSR, and in the early Cold War period, Turkey became a member of NATO, and Turkey joined the Western Bloc, and became again a USA ally. And in those days, most Middle Eastern countries followed anti-American foreign policy. So in early Cold War period, the newly established Middle Eastern countries and Turkey were not on the same side. Turkey was on the NATO side, an American ally, and most Middle Eastern countries were somehow Soviet ally. Not like Eastern European countries, but they were aligning their foreign policies with the Soviet Union. So late Cold period, due to a variety of reasons, various reasons, Turkish-American relations started to deteriorate. By Turkish students, they will tell me the reasons very quickly. Actually, Cuban Missile Crisis, Cyprus issue, arms embargo. There's a series of reasons. And once Turkish-American relations started to decline, and this was the period of the oil crisis of 1970s and 80s, so rapprochement between Turkey and Middle East started to take place. So this was just an introduction. There's more period between 60s and 80s I will not get into the details of this, but this was an introduction of how Turkish and Middle Eastern relations were shaped in the early years. Now, I'm coming to my subject, my main subject. So my main subject is actually desecuritization. But first, in order to, desecuritization and securitization, in order to explain that, I'm looking at three different periods. So 1990s, security, 2000s, desecuritization, 2010s, back to security. So security, security, security. I keep talking about the same issue, but that's the most important issue in foreign policy analysis from a realistic perspective. Of course, there's also liberal perspective, which means economic interdependence. There's also social constructivism, which looks at the values of the countries and the perceptions. But I think realism plays the most significant role. Anyway, so securitization of Turkish Middle Eastern relations during the 1990s. This is a tough period. You have to look at the period first. International environment, like Baskın Orhan in his Turkish foreign policy books, he starts with the international environment. 1990s, fall of Soviet Union, collapse of communism, establishment of Russian Federation, and the independence of Eastern European countries. I mean, they're independent, but their transition from communist rule to kind of a capitalist rule, all that is happening. And the Balkan countries, that's also beginning of the collapse of Yugoslavia. So Turkey doesn't know what to do. It's scared, actually. I mean, life was much easier when there was a bipolar world. You were on one side, there was the other side. It was easy to judge. But now there are many sides. You don't know what to do. So your foreign policy is very much based on security, because what am I now? Yes, I'm still a NATO ally. I'm still a NATO member, American ally, but now I have more space to maneuver because now there are new countries, but I'm a little scared. I don't know what to do, kind of. So in the 1990s, Turkey's regional security concerns were related to Turkey's own internal problems. And what was Turkey's own internal problem? Well, it's related to a very sensitive issue. Let me tell briefly to the non-Turkish students what this issue is. 20% of the population of Turkey is Kurdish, and for Turks and for anybody in the world, territorial integrity is very important, and it is okay to express their Kurdish nationalism. So rise of Kurdish nationalism is not a problem, but Turkey's main concern is not to give a piece of land to anyone. So territorial integrity. So imagine fall of Ottoman Empire, establishment of Republic of Turkey, and nobody wants to give a single square meter of land to anybody else. And the PKK, or Kurdish Workers' Party, Partiya Kargaran Kürtistan in Kurdish, this political party originally was established as a Marxist-Leninist organization, but eventually it turned into a kind of a guerrilla movement, which has been fighting to get a piece of land from Turkey, piece of land from Iraq, piece of land from Syria, and establish Kurdistan. Do they have the right or not is not my issue at this moment. As I told you, it's a very sensitive issue for us Turks. Anyway, so this issue came out 1990s. On top of the international fragile, unsecure environment inside Turkey, there was this separatist movement. So Turkey's activism in the region was limited to its immediate neighbors, focused on security issues, and it followed the security-oriented foreign policy. So there was the rise of PKK, Kurdish Workers' Party, and they were attacking anywhere and everywhere, starting from 1980s, to schools, to kids, to killing teachers, civilians. So it wasn't a war on the border only. It was in the big cities, and it was really putting our morale all the way down, because it was really awful. In the 1990s, use of military, use of hard power, balancing alliances, military alliances, intervention. These were the main slogans or the main logos of Turkish foreign policy in 1990s, especially with the rise of PKK and the Gulf War. This is the first Gulf War when Saddam Hussein decided to invade Kuwait, and when the Western forces under the leadership of United States of America intervened into Iraq, including Turkey. Turkey joined US forces during that operation. Because due to this vacuum created, power vacuum, once Saddam lost power, a lot of Kurds started from Iraq to move to Turkey, which is fine. They had to run away from Saddam actually, but you don't know who's a guerrilla terrorist and who's a just a peaceful civilian. So all these moves are really, really scary for us. Okay, so that was securitization. When we look at securitization of Turkish Middle East relations during the 1990s, now I'm looking at mainly three countries, and the first one is Syria. So this is the period of Hafez al-Assad. So with Syria, number one issue was Syria was supporting PKK, the Kurdish Workers' Party or the separatist movement that keeps attacking Turkey to take a chunk of land from Turkey, capture a piece of land from Turkey. So this, it was obvious, it was proven that these members, guerrilla movements, they were trained in Syria, and their leader Öcalan lived in Syria. And as a result of that, there was intensification of PKK attacks to Turkey in late 1990s. So, I mean, for a long time, Turkey tried to talk to Syrian government. It didn't work. And it was a kind of, there were two other issues between Turkey and Syria. And one was hydropolitics, water politics. Two ancient rivers. You see the map here. There are two ancient rivers, Euphrates and Tigris. Between these two rivers, Turkey was building a big dam project. And once this dam project was going to be completed, the amount of water going from Turkey to Syria wouldn't be the same amount. So that was one problem, water problem. Second is it's a city, the ancient city of Antioch. You can find the name in the Bible. It is called Hatay. Once upon a time, it was called Sancak. If you look at the map, like the city really sticks out of Turkey, and it looks like it should be part of Syria, kind of, but there was a plebiscite in the city in the early years of the Republic. There was an Arab population, Armenian population, Turkish population, Jewish population, almost anyone and everyone. And as a result of that plebiscite, the people of the city decided that they want to be part of Turkey, and eventually the majority of the people living there were Turkish. But Syrians never forgot about that, and whenever there's a problem, they always claim that, hey, Hatay is ours, not yours. So that was another problem. So these two problems and PKK guerrillas moving to Turkey was another serious problem. Iraqi relations, while Iraq was under the rule of Saddam Hussein, and Saddam was not happy with the rebellious Kurds, so in a way, fighting with the Kurds, Turkey and Iraq was on the same side. But since there was always some power vacuum on the Iraqi border during Saddam period, PKK terrorists were not only attacking from Syrian border, but also from the Iraqi border. So imagine you have two neighbors, and there are always attacks coming from those two neighbors. So Turkey played an active role in the first Gulf War of 1990-1991. And by the end of the Gulf War, we were expecting to gain something, but rather than gaining, we started losing. So more PKK attacks, because Gulf War brought a power vacuum. Saddam was not controlling anything. So more attacks to Turkey, and there was a massive Kurdish refugee flow to Turkey. They were running away from Saddam. Here we go. That's from 1990s. They started living on the mountains. Eventually, some were settled in big cities like Erzurum or Diyarbakir, and some went back. But it was quite a chaos in 1990s. And then establishment of a Kurdish regional government in Iraq itself in 1992 was also very scary for Turkey, because we thought, if that happens, maybe the Kurds of Turkey, they would also want a freedom, and they would like to establish their own country, kind of. So, and there was this pipeline which we closed due to the war to destroy the economy of Iraq, but we destroyed our economy in some ways. It was the Kirkuk-Ceyhan pipeline and use of Incirlik base for Operation Provide Commerce. So we had to open one of our bases to American soldiers, which was not that great either. So these were the days of security. I feel like I miss one country, and so what I had was I talked about Middle Eastern relations. I talked about Syria. I talked about working relations. Okay, so all right, here we go. Iranian relations. Somehow I missed it. Let me come back. 1990s, Turkey and Iran, until the Shah, things were very smooth and nice, and two Western-looking countries were aligned with each other, and Shah and the father Shah was really father Rıza Pahlavi. There's the son Rıza Pahlavi. The father was really interested in following Atatürk's reforms, but after the 1979 Islamic Revolution, the ideological differences between the two countries showed up. So Turkey is more Western oriented and trying to establish a secular country, trying to separate mosque and the politics from each other. But Iran is an Islamic republic and trying to bring religion into politics. So that was one issue, and we were scared that we were skeptical and we were a little sure that Iran was getting involved in some of the serial assassinations of some Kemalist intellectuals in Turkey, such as Uğur Mumcu, although Iran never accepted our accusation. And there was this competition over newly independent countries of Central Asia and Caucasus in 1990s. But neither Turkey nor Iran was successful in that competition to dominate economically, politically these countries. We know who was successful. It was Russian Federation, of course. So, but there was a competition. Turkey accused Iran for attempting to export an anti-secular regime to Turkey, and but Iranians always rejected that. And there is another issue which is too much details. I will skip that. It's about Iranian ambassadors talk in a small town near Ankara in Sinjan, bringing Sharia back to Turkey, kind of. So that was a bit too much. So 1990s, full of security because of the international environment, because of the PKK attacks, and Iraq and Syria helping, and from Iran, they are trying to export some kind of Islamic revolution. Are they really or not? I'm sure there's an attempt, although Iran always rejected such accusations. Okay, and the next one now. Okay, this is the too good to be true period, 2000s. Everything seemed to be wonderful. And the architect of this wonderful melodic expression, zero problem with the neighbors, was the Minister of Foreign Affairs, a professor of international relations, Ahmet Davutoğlu. But of course, he's not the first one. Even before Ahmet Davutoğlu, there were other Minister of Foreign Affairs from other political parties that also tried very hard to bring peaceful relations with our neighbors, including Ismail Cem. Anyway, but Ahmet Davutoğlu gets most of the credit. It was a short period. Davutoğlu did a good job, and international environment worked for his favor too. The securitization of the Middle Eastern relations during 2000s. So that was wonderful. How did that happen? Well, first of all, PKK. Some agreements with PKK, some peaceful talks with PKK, unilateral ceasefire by PKK, and also Iraq and Syria helping Turkey in its fight with PKK. So that's very important. So in 1990s, so you try to desecuritize a security problem, and that really makes your life easier. In the 1990s, Turkey's activism was limited to its immediate neighbors and focused mainly on security issues, security-oriented. But in 2000s, Turkey's activism was region-wide, focused on various issues, and PKK attacks that were coming from Syria and Iraq, they went down. Those two countries helped us to calm this down. And so the relations of 1990s completely changed. Now relations of 2000s were diplomatic, soft power, zero problem with neighbors, diplomatic negotiation, engagement, economic interdependence, mediation, and dealing with many countries. So that was Davutoğlu's idea. I mean, he had the strategic debt doctrine in his famous book, Turkey should guarantee its own security and stability by taking on a more active, constructive role to provide order, stability, and security in its region. So that was the idea. I mean, those days were great. I love this photo. This is Turkish Prime Minister of the time, Erdogan, and the wife, and this is Bashir Assad and the wife Esma. They're all together enjoying each other's company. They even went on a holiday together. So it was wonderful to see the leaders together. This was for the first time after so many years. And these personal relations, which Erdogan was quite good at, particularly with the Middle Eastern countries, he even feels more comfortable. He feels at home with his religious education background. It was wonderful. I mean, there was a rapid improvement of the relations. Of course, there was a change in the international environment. Hafez Assad, a hardliner, passed away, and in those days when Bashir Assad came to power, a doctor, educated in England. I was a student doing my PhD, and I thought, wow, that's the way it is. In those days, Jordan also had the young king, Abdullah, and Morocco had a young king, Mohammed. So it was the time for the young kings, young rulers, the sons, more educated kind of. So Bashir Assad was showing all the characteristics of that, but nowadays it's a different story. So rapid improvement of relations and Adana Accords. Adana Accords is Turkey and Syria sign an agreement, and according to that agreement, what happened was, according to that agreement, it met all Turkish main demands, including a serious crackdown on PKK bases, the expulsion of PKK fighters, the Kurdish Workers' Party's fighters, and the leader Abdullah Öcalan. So Syria, under Bashir Assad rule, accepted that. They got rid of Öcalan, and then and they decided that they are not going to support the Kurdish guerrilla movement anymore. And after this, we opened the borders. The mines were cleaned up, landmines along the borders. There was a lot of trade. So imagine these hundreds of kilometers of a border, and increasing cooperation on tourism, trade, investment, abolition of visas, joint military exercises, and Turkey defended Assad regime against American President Bush's imposed economic sanctions in 2004. They signed a joint political declaration establishing a high-level strategic cooperation council, and Turkey even attempted to play the role of a mediator between Israel and Syria. So those were wonderful days. I mean, the most important is to establish these peaceful relations with Syria. It was a breathing space. I remember one of my cousins who used to bike with his wife. They biked all the way to Syria and they traveled. They enjoyed it so much in those days. And Turkish-Iraqi relations, we were scared when Saddam collapsed. We didn't know what was going to happen with the Kurds, and Kurdish regional government was established. We were so scared. But what Abdullah Ahmet Davutoğlu did was, the foreign minister, he got many hundreds of businessmen with him. He went to this newly established Kurdish regional government, and we started all the construction business. Turkey is good at construction. We love to construct. We construct and deconstruct. Anyway, we construct. So, and one of my students from that region told me that if you enter a supermarket or a little market in this area, in the Kurdish area, all the goodies, all the goods are from Turkey. Everything, almost everything. That's what my student Ziad told me once, and our PhD candidate. So when US invaded Iraq in 2003, that's the period of Justice and Development Party under Erdogan, Turkey did not join, although his party wanted to join, but Turkey did not join this war, and it improved its very careful relations. So rather than becoming an enemy of the Kurds living in Iraq, what you do is you help them economically, so you get this economic interdependence. So that's the idea in foreign policy analysis. If two countries are interdependent to each other economically, they do not fight with each other. So that's what happened. Trade volume increased, and this Kurdish regional government became a mediator in Turkish and the Kurds of Turkey relations. That's important, and it was also the most important. It was the significant supplier of oil and natural gas. So, and Turkey became the key transit route for Kurdish exports, hydrocarbon, natural gas and oil to world markets, and Turkey received transit fees. So, I mean, establishing these economic relations with the Iraqi Kurds paid well, and everything seemed to be doing well, and something similar happened with the I keep skipping something. I do it very fast. Iraqi, and here we go. Iranian relations. Yeah. Somehow I keep passing slides. So Iranian relations improvement, a lot of improvement. So Iran stopped trying to export Islamic revolution or stopped attempting any suicide attempts to our Kemalist journalists, and they also stopped supporting PJAK, PJAK. It's another PKK version of the Kurds of Iran, and they signed a memorandum of understanding. And the President Abdullah Gül took many businessmen, even scholars, academicians, went to Iran, and then they had all these wonderful agreements. And Tebris Erzurum gas pipeline started carrying natural gas to Turkey, reducing Turkish dependence to Russian natural gas. So, and well, when Iran had the problems with nuclear power, and Turkey played their mediating role, including Brazil, Turkey. And in those days, which I did not include that the earlier period because there was not much going on with Gulf countries during Justice and Development Party's period of 2000s. It's still the same party in power. So political trade, economic, political economic trade. So keep saying trade and trade and trade. Trade improved. So direct funds coming from GCC countries, Gulf cooperation countries, and Turkish businessmen is in their markets. Turkey attracting investment from those countries, and that was also there. And Turkey is also not supporting American invasion of Iraq in 2003. That was a big credit for Turkey. The credit was given by the Arabs. That was important, and a lot of agreements are signed. So, what happened? What happened? Everything seemed to be very well, like Saudi Arabia, Turkey relations, many visits, high-level visits, mutual negative perceptions improved during this period. Erdogan with the king, Abdullah. So after that, his son came to power. That made some changes. And the same with Qatar relations, particularly with Qatar. Turkey is selling military equipment to Qatar, and they are signing both Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Turkey. They're all signing all wonderful agreements, fighting with terrorism and economic interdependence. So what happens? It's the Arab Spring. So what happened was, it was too good to be true. 2000s, desecuritization was playing an important role in Turkey's relations with its Arab neighbors, with its Iranian neighbors, with the Middle Eastern neighbors, which I did not include Turkish-Israeli relations because that's a completely different story. So it was too good to be true, and it was wonderful. It was a short time, but all these wonderful relations were paying. Security was not the main issue. It was economy, cultural issues, tourism, trade. They were the main issues between Turkey and those countries. Let me watch my time. 45. Okay, 45 minutes, and I got some messages. All right, yes. I think I got a correction. It was this Adana agreement between Turkey and Syrian government was not during Bashar Assad, but it was during the father Hafez Assad period. Let me correct myself. It happens sometimes when you get excited and when you try to explain everything in a very short time. Arab Spring. So that's the turning point, and that's actually the main subject of my presentation. But of course, I had to give that background. I cannot just start talking about securitization of Turkish Middle Eastern relations without talking about the background of these relations. So unfortunately, back to securitization of Turkish-Middle Eastern relations during the 2010s. Turkish foreign policy transformed back to security-oriented foreign policy and started once more resorting to the use of hard power and coercive diplomacy. So those good old days are over. What happened? What happened was, well, when Arab Spring spread to Syria, you know what happened? It was the civil war in Syria. The civil war in Syria starts in 2011 and we are in 2021. It has been 10 years. For 10 years, there's a war in Syria. And that's our next door neighbor. And we are sharing a long border with this country. So, Arab Spring led to the civil war in Syria, and it led to the rise of PKK attacks. So once Syria collapsed and many different groups came out of Syria, what happened was the Kurdish groups of Syria, YPG and PYD, the openings are very complicated. These Kurdish groups allied with the Turkish Kurdish groups and then started to attack back to Turkey, and we are back to square one. So these issues were already resolved during Bashar Assad period, but once his power collapsed, it was complicated. And then apart from YPG, PYD, PKK, there was also newly established Islamist groups such as ISIS. So these ISIS attacks also turned into bloody events in Turkey, and lots of attacks. One attack is Sultan Ahmet Square. The other attack is, it's very upsetting actually. It is in Ankara, near the train station, where more than 100 people died and around 10 tourists died in an attack in Sultan Ahmet, and ISIS said we did it. So back to securitization of Turkish-Syrian relations, back to securitization of Turkish-Iraqi relations, back to securitization of Turkish-Iraqi relations, Iranian relations, and even with Gulf countries. So when the first protests broke out against the Assad regime, Bashar Assad regime, Turkey tried to convince Assad to implement political reforms. On the right-hand corner of my slides, you can see, I don't know if that picture belongs to that talk, but there were many talks held between Davutoğlu, Foreign Minister Davutoğlu, and Bashar Assad. That was a very long talk, 7 hours. It lasted about 7 hours. Foreign Minister Davutoğlu tried to convince Bashar Assad to start some reforms, not to get involved in a war, but it just did not work. And when Syrian government insisted on using force, or maybe they had no other choice, or that's what they preferred, so Turkey took a clear stance against Bashar Assad regime and started openly hosting the Syrian opposition and the Free Syrian Army by August 2011. So Turkey was not on the side of Bashar Assad, but Turkey was on the side that opposes Bashar Assad. But the problem with this side is this side has conflicts among themselves too. So PKK attacks with the help of PYD and YPG increased. That was one big security back. It was back in our hands. It came back to us, which was heartbreaking to see those attacks and to see the people dying because of these attacks, civilians being killed. But then there's another very heartbreaking issue, 3.7 million by now. These refugees running away from Syria, where would they go? Of course, they will first go to the country that's closest. So the ones living in the north came to Turkey. The ones living in the southeast, they went to Jordan. They went to Lebanon. Turkey is the #1 country. I think Jordan is #2, and Lebanon is the #3 country that accepted Syrian refugees. So that's a big population. I mean, percentage-wise, Turkish population is 80 million. So about 4 million out of 80 million is not much. So, but still, it's a big population to take care of and to help. So, due to those PKK attacks, in coalition with YPG and PYD. Now, Turkey had no choice but start these cross-border operations, which may sound a bit rough for international relations because then you are violating the border of a country, but that country also is in a war. You don't know who is ruling it. So these operations have many different names, and there are many of them. Some of them, majority of them are here written. Operation Euphrates Shield was the number one. Fırat Kalkan operasyonu in Turkish, and then Operation Peace, the Spring, Barış Pınarı, Operation Spring Shield, Bahar Kalkanı, Operation Tiger Claw, Kaplan Pençesi, Pençe, Kartal Pençesi, and there's Operation Claw Eagle number 2, and these are very recent, February 2021. And in between those, there were summits that are held by Turkey to resolve the issue. This is one of them. I like this photo actually. Erdogan, Putin, President Erdogan, President Putin, and Chancellor Merkel, they all look confident, but I always love the look on the face of Macron. It's like, what am I doing here? Kind of. But it's these are important attempts. There are more attempts. The other attempts are called Astana Peace Talks. That's the capital city of Kazakhstan. And that's a series of talks. They were initiated mainly by Russian Federation and Iran and Turkey, which are not on the same side in the war, but they all want a peaceful resolution. In a way, a peaceful resolution under the leadership of Bashar Assad, which Turkey originally was not on that side, but somehow Turkey joined these Astana peace talks. So these are the refugees. I have many heartbreaking photos, but it really makes me cry every time I see them. The number of camps on the border and the people running for their life across the border, it's really sad. These are from 2016, 2017 kind of photos, or maybe earlier. So people are running, 3.7 million refugees in Turkey. So when these people are running again, they are running for life. You cannot say, hey, just wait a minute, are you related to PKK, YPG? Or are you a peaceful civilian? You cannot ask this question. They just get into your country. So with all these peaceful people running for their life, a lot of people related to guerrilla movement are entering into Turkey too. So two issues started the securitization of Turkish Middle Eastern relations, particularly Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Iraqi relations, well, in Iraq, the leadership changed. Rather than Sunni leadership, now there were more Shiite leadership, and the Sunni leadership of Turkey, Shiite leadership of Iraq sometimes could not get along, and al-Maliki government also. Turkey was supporting anti-Assad forces while Iraq was supporting somehow Assad government. So that was also a conflict between the two sides. And when PKK ended its unilateral ceasefire in 2015, then what happened was PKK bases in northern Iraq, PKK starts attacking from there, and then the Turkish government starts airstrikes, which was a violation to Iraqi rights. But this went on and on and on, and all of a sudden, Kurdish regional government wanted to declare its independence from Iraqi federal government, and Turkey was afraid that such an impact would have a domino effect to the Kurds of Turkey. Although this independence declaration did not help much, but that was also a serious problem. Iranian relations have the ups and downs. There was a securitization, a little bit of desecuritization, but they're on the same side in the Syrian civil war. Deployment of NATO missile radar in Malatya Kyrgyz was considered as a threat to Iranian security, but there is a little move towards rapprochement. You can see the photo, Astana peace process. Now it's called, I think, Kazakhs changed the name of the city. It's Nur Sultan now, Nur Sultan peace process, but they were called Astana. It used to be called Almaty. So that Astana peace process in the capital city of Kazakhstan brought the countries together. There were a series of meetings. You can see three leaders, Rouhani, President Rouhani, President Putin, and President Erdogan together. So Both Iran and Turkey oppose KRG's Kurdish Regional Governance referendum. Both countries oppose Saudi blockade of Qatar in 2017. That's another issue. There are so many issues to cover. Well. Another issue, and I'm coming to the end almost. For my Italian and for my Russian students, for them, it's a bit too much of a bombardment of Turkish politics, but also it gives you an idea about Syrian politics, Iraqi politics too. It gives you an idea about Middle East politics. For Turkish students, it's much easier to understand those details because they are so used to studying and researching these issues. Well, Turkish-Saudi Arabian relations in 2000s was wonderful. It was too good to be true, but they started deteriorating when the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman came to power. And it got worse when this Saudi Arabian journalist Jamal Khashoggi was murdered in 2008 in Istanbul, Saudi Arabian consulate. And Turkey was really upset and angry with this. Qatar diplomatic crisis in June 2017, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Egypt, and United Arab Emirates cut off diplomatic and trade relations with Qatar. They accused the country for supporting terrorism and destabilizing the region. Although Qatar rejected all these accusations, with this blockade, Qatar faced serious economic political blockade, and with this blockade, Qatar's economy was going to collapse, but Turkey supported Qatar economically and diplomatically and attempted to solve the crisis. And on top of it, Turkey sent Turkish troops to be deployed at a Turkish military base in Qatar in June 2017. And Saudi Arabia was not happy with this. So there's also competition between the two countries as a leadership in the Islamic world. There's also competition between Saudi Arabia and Iran as a leadership in Islamic world too, but Shiite and Sunnite leadership. In Turkey and Saudi Arabia is Sunni leadership. So Qatar crisis, Egyptian coup of 2000 Turkey, which Turkey did not support, conflict in Syria, Libya civil war. So two sides are not on the same side. And interestingly enough, which I do not want to get into the details, that's another complicated issue. It's Eastern Mediterranean dispute. It's exploration of oil and natural gas in Eastern Mediterranean, which is started by Greece and Cyprus, Greek part of Cyprus, and other European countries are included, including Italy. And interestingly enough, and Turkey says, well, Cyprus does not belong to one group, but with two groups, so you cannot do this exploration on the Turkish side of Cyprus, according to exclusive economic zone, international sea law. But Saudi Arabia expresses solidarity with Cyprus and Greece against Turkey's conduct in Eastern Mediterranean. Interestingly enough, relations with that country is over too. And I'm over too. 55 minutes. So 55 minutes and I'm almost done. There's a lot of issues to talk about. This is a very complicated issue. After I chose this issue to lecture, I was really upset. I said, how am I going to finish this? So what I'm trying to tell my friends, Turkish, Russian, Italian students and my colleagues of the Power Project, foreign policies are always related to security. It would be wonderful to desecuritize them. And we had that little taste in 2000s. Yes, there was a short period. It wasn't 100%, but it was almost too good to be true. It was getting there that we were having economic interdependence with Syria, Iraq, and Iran. And we still have those economic relations. They did not go away. But these securitized relations are back to security. Why? Here are the reasons. Civil war in your neighboring country, which you have a long border. Attacks from your neighboring countries, PKK, PYD, YPG. They come from Syria, they come from Iraq. That really hurts you. Violation of your territory, and then you find yourself violating their territory too. And attacks to civilians. That's the worst part. And all these refugees, that's also related to human security. So at this very moment, with all these events happening, there is no way Turkey can desecuritize its foreign policy towards the Middle East. So for a period of time when the civil war in Syria is going on, when we cannot resolve our PKK problem, this securitization of Turkish foreign policy towards its Middle Eastern neighbors will continue. Well, you may ask questions, what about Turkish-Israeli relations? That's a whole different episode, which I didn't want to get to. What about Turkish-Egyptian relations? Yes, that's a different story too. And then Libyan relations, that's a different story too. I think I'm done here. I will stop sharing